legacy planning is not just about you. It's a blueprint for generations to come. It starts with estate planning, the cornerstone that ensures your assets find their rightful place. But let's elevate it. Enter trusts. These aren't just legal constructs. They're vessels carrying your values, safeguarding assets for specific objectives, be it your grandchild's education or a family member's special needs. Now, let's talk philanthropy. Your legacy isn't just what you leave behind. It's the change you make in the world. Charitable giving is not an afterthought. It's a core component. Whether it's through charitable trusts or direct bequests, your wealth can be a catalyst for societal transformation. But remember, this is not a solo endeavor. Consult with financial advisors, legal experts, and tax professionals to navigate the intricate legal and ethical landscape. And most importantly, make it a family affair. Educate the next generation, not just about wealth, but about the values that wealth can uphold. So I want to ask Heather to continue what Daniele was talking about, the importance of communication. Can you elaborate on the importance of communication within a family when it comes to financial planning and estate planning?
Yes, and I think it's really important that we've mentioned the word communication a lot here, but how do we make that really practical? And I think that often when families are thinking about communicating, particularly about money, that a lot of different feelings come up and a lot of different dynamics are feared that might come up. And really, the way that I look at it and the way that we actually see this play out time and time again is communication often isn't about a ton of family dynamics. It's simply about information sharing. Okay, so if you're looking at it in the context and the way that we think about holistic wealth planning at Vanguard is almost think of it like three intersecting circles. Okay, so you're thinking about that investment plan, you're thinking about the estate plan that you need to have in place to be able to transfer the wealth, and then you're thinking about the family preparation plan. And that's really the angle that I come in at. And so very often as parents, including myself, we're jumping right into those legal documents and we're starting to chart out what we think our plans should be, or we're thinking about who we should name to do what. But we don't typically even ask the people that might either be receiving or responsible in the future what their thoughts are on it. Now, I'm sensitive to the fact with communication that families often hesitate to share the amount of the wealth. And I think that that is totally out of families' discretion. But that doesn't mean that you can't start to discuss plans, even if you're not going to share the amount of the wealth. And simply asking things like, hey, we're thinking about passing this thing, whether let's just say property through generations. How would you feel about receiving that? Do you want it? What are the responsibilities associated with that? Do you feel like you can take that on? And so you can start to see how what we're calling the psychology or the communication doesn't necessarily have to be fraught with dynamics. It can simply be asking questions or sharing some simple facts or thoughts and getting that response back to help you to shape the holistic plan for the better in the future. Otherwise, what we find is when you're not doing that up front, doesn't mean it always happens, but you're at risk of making plans without making sure that you have the people in place on board with where that vision is going. So I hope that that helps to just take it a little bit more deeper and a little bit more practical.
Caleb, in your family's experience, is your financial advisor serving as the quarterback with the lawyer, the accountant, or do you have to do that? What has your experience been like?
Yeah, I have to set the wheels in motion in terms of what the overall outcome we want to have to take place. And I'm working, it's complicated because I'm here in New York. The estate I'm working with and my parents' trust is in New Mexico. State by state, as you guys know, is very different, very unique. So I'm working with a New Mexico trust lawyer. My advisor and planner are here in New York, but they know the overall scheme. I had to find that lawyer, but I brought everybody together to kind of get on the same page. So I had to do a lot of orchestrating there, not a ton, but in order to make sure that the desired outcome is going to be met, I had to bring those people together. Now, my advisor would have been happy to recommend somebody, but like I said, they're in New York. The particular trust I'm working with right now is in another state. With my own trust and with my wife and I and our wills and our trusts, we do work with our advisor directly on that. So I have a little bit of a complicated situation, but here when I'm working on our own plan here, that is all through our advisor. And I'm very happy with my financial advisor and the RIA I work with, because they do holistic planning. So I, of course, want them to allocate responsibly and intelligently, and I want them to make money with my money. But my financial life has become very complicated by choice over the last 30 years. I have small businesses. I produce films. I have a production company. Each one of the films I make has its own LLC. I have kids going to college. There's college planning. There's insurance. There's taxes. There's investing. So I'm really taking everything from the buffet that my advisor offers to me. And there I have complete awareness as to what's going on in my life with my wife and our family, and what I'm trying to do with my parents as well.
Dr. John, how can the D Martini method be applied to help families in crafting their generational legacies?
Well, the Demartini method is a series of very concise questions to help people who are having, you might say, differences of opinion and conflicts, resolve those conflicts and have more reflective awareness and appreciation for each other, because, every human being has a unique set of values. It's fingerprint specific. And when money comes in, they spend their money according to the hierarchy of their values. The hierarchy of their values dictates their financial destiny. And if you have a high value on raising kids, your money's going to go to the kids. If you have a high value on asset accumulation, it's going to go to that. It has to travel, it goes there. And so when you're actually doing estate planning, you're not only thinking about, what's the quantity and how it's going to be distributed and what's the trust structures, but it's also, what are they going to do with the money? And are you going to communicate what you would like with the money in terms of their values, so they're more likely to find a hybrid to accomplish with it? Because you can guarantee that when money goes somewhere, it's going to be spent according to the way their value structure is, because that's how they're making decisions. So every perception, decision, and action they take is based on that value structure. So finding out what those values are, and then using the Demartini method to dissolve the conflicts between those values, and then also a linking process, how specifically is what they're wanting to do with money helping you fulfill what you're wanting to do with the money, and find a link between them so there's a respectful communication and a passover between them, because that's going to be involved in the decision making on the estate, what you're going to do and who you're going to allocate monies to. I have a case right now that I'm working with right now that there's a woman who is a very highly educated individual, highly responsible with money, and another brother who is the opposite, complementary opposites in the family, as you know. And so the father is basically saying, well, I want to allocate money to her because she's probably going to do something with it and be a good steward with it, and it's going to grow. If I give it to him, it's just going to disappear. But at the same time, that now creates a clash in the family. So you need to know how to communicate effectively what your intentions are in a way where their values are being met, or you end up with conflict. And this is you've seen a lot of wealthy families having conflicts as a result of the disbursement of money. So that's where the Demartini method comes in conflict resolution, communication, and also understanding and respecting that everybody has a different set of values. How do you communicate what you value in terms of their values? So there's some sort of a sustainable, fair exchange in the dissemination of the monies that are accumulated.
When I think about communication, the thought is kind of daunting, because even when I think throughout history, like there have been peoples who have had conflict for thousands of years and continue to have conflict today. And as was mentioned, even within a family, as Dr. John D. Martini was saying, you have one sibling who spends, one who saves. Just the dynamics within a family are so complex. Sometimes you're more comfortable talking about money to your mother, but not your father. And then you have siblings who don't talk to each other. Getting back to Daniele, any tips on what's your advice on actually communicating well? And after you, maybe it goes back to Heather's background in psychology, that she can tackle some of these issues.
Yeah, I find it fascinating how, when you look throughout human history, so many of the people who are renowned for being incredible at doing what they do, being great leaders, being the emperor, being this and being, are not necessarily the same people who are good at passing those values on to their kids and to the next generation. Like, take a case in point. Think about somebody like Marcus Aurelius, the author of the Meditations, the renowned as one of the best emperors that Rome ever had. He does what he does. And, generally speaking, the assessment is that he was brilliant. The empire in his hand he couldn't have gone any better. And then he leaves the empire. So talk about legacy and wealth, right? He leaves a whole empire in the hands of his son, who's one of the absolutely worst emperors of Rome. And that's a lot of competition, because they had plenty of terrible emperors. So to be in the top 5, that means really trying. And so then you start wondering, okay, you wrote this philosophical book that's been passed down to the ages and people still read to this day. You clearly handle your business well. You handle the empire well. How much time and energy did you leave to educate your son? Something that's it's as important as it gets. Not only is important on a personal level, like I would imagine that would be high out on your priority, but also even purely if you're thinking about your duty. Marcus Aurelius is so big on the duty to empire and what he needs to do to govern well, do this and the other, and he does it. But then you invested so little time in educating the next generation that you hand it into the hands of a guy who screws up everything you have done in your whole life. And again, not a stranger, it's your son. But obviously, you haven't done the homework to relate to him as a human being, to treat, to do the things that are needed to raise a good human being. And that, unfortunately, is more common than one would expect. I mean, think about how many fields do you find somebody that you know who's amazing and you like them and you respect them, and you look at the next generation, their kids, or if they are lucky, maybe their grandkids, but usually not far removed from the original point, where you're like, what happened there? Where did things go wrong in that pattern? And really, that's where you go back to communication and where you invested your time and energy. You may have been the greatest manager in the world, the greatest emperor in the world, the greatest leader in the world in that sense. But it doesn't mean much if he's going to die with you, if you haven't been able to pass those values along. And of course, that's a whole other set of skills. That's probably why it's rare. Because they are the same people who are really good at doing one thing are not necessarily the most skilled naturally at doing this other aspect. And that's why I think things like what some of you guys are bringing up about the necessity for education, this is not something that happens automatically. It needs to be done through unless you're lucky enough that that's how you grow up and that's how you are told by your parents and grandparents. It's probably something that you need to develop. It's like a muscle, like anything else, that just doesn't happen because you're good at one thing. You're automatically going to be good at this. And you see this throughout history over and over and over again, almost unfailingly. Within 1 or 2 generations, whatever the values of somebody are completely gone.
Andy, I got a question. May I share a little story? If it's out of a line and you need to go to the next one. I was working in London, and a guy consulted with me, and he asked me, he had $3 billion. His father had about $28 billion. And his father gave up on him because he raised him without any responsibility and just kind of, just gave him things, something for nothing, and robbed him of dignity, accountability, responsibility, and productivity. And this young boy has basically received money without meaning, and money without meaning leads to debauchery instead of philanthropy. And so this guy comes to me and says, I'm angry at my father because he's not giving me the company. He's not passing the whole fortune to me. And I'm angry and bitter to him. He says, I need to know what do I need to get the business and the money. And I said, you really want to know that? I said, okay. I said, give all the money he's given you back. Give it all back. And go work at the company, start in the factory, and go work at the bottom level of the most mundane job and work your way up through every one of those jobs and work your way until you know everything about that company, until you know what they're experiencing and what's responsible for that. And work your way up every level of those things until you understand that company. And when he sees that you're willing to work and do something and be enough philanthropic, enough to have a service ethic, as the Book of Wealth by Hubert Bancroft pointed out, When he sees that you've done that, he's probably going to see that my son is committed, he's ready, he's capable of doing it. You'll probably get the $28 billion in the company. I said, if not, you're going to be a little brat, a little boy that's never grown up and has been spoiled. That's why you don't ever want to rob people of dignity, accountability, responsibility, and productivity when you're passing on money. You want to make sure they have some accountabilities, or they're guaranteed to squander money. They're guaranteed to let their amygdala go for immediate gratification instead of long-term accumulation and vision and contribution.
Very, very valuable lessons. Thank you for that story. Let's move on to segment 4.